Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rails 256th New Social Environment. I'm Nick Bennett, the Special Projects Editor here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a very special event, the one-year anniversary of our NSE series. We started all of our events with two important acknowledgements. The first is that here in Brooklyn, we are on the unceded land and waters of Lenape-Hoking, which still belongs to the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. The second is an acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter. Although we have for many events named many of those that have lost their lives to police violence throughout the past year, I want to dedicate today's program to Breonna Taylor, who was murdered in her sleep by police a year ago on March 13th. This past year has demanded everyone's attention that there is much to learn and unlearn to undo the legacy of white supremacy in this country. I encourage you all to check the chat for a document we will post of living resources. I'd now like to say just a few words from my perspective on the series. A year ago, as the curatorial assistant for the Rail, I was very excited to begin planning with Fong an exhibition dedicated to climate change as part of our ongoing Rail curatorial project. Artists need to create on the same scale that society has the capacity to destroy, a title that originates from Lauren Bond and our comrades at the Metabolic Studio. But the pandemic and quarantine changed everything. My brilliant Rail comrades all came together with ideas, and from those ideas, this series was born. Now, as the special projects editor, it has been a true privilege this past year learning from artists, scholars, scientists, activists, poets, and so many others that are proving that the arts and the humanities are resilient under any conditions. This series has been a beautiful testament to me and to many others to the scale at which a community can create something meaningful and to take on something that seems impossible and to just make it happen. I share my deep gratitude and love to everyone that has been a part of this series. And I ask everyone to stick around for the end for a toast to celebrate. So from that, I'm very honored to pass the mic over to my Rail comrade, the Rail's managing editor, Charlie Schultz.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you everyone who's here today. I'm Charlie, I'm the Rail's managing editor. I am usually the one hassling you about deadlines. Today, I'm here to really express the warmth that I feel being in the company of so many people who have exhibited such a dedication and depth of character as we've undertaken this daily effort, which I hope isn't lost on anyone that, you know, wasn't part of the rhythm of this organism until we decided it had to be. And the kind of flexibility, the creativity, the radical discipline that's been exercised to make this series what it's become has been an amazing thing to watch and be part of. Much more than I could have ever hoped, and much more than I could have ever dreamed of getting out of such a difficult and tragic year. I want to kind of finish my remarks by acknowledging especially all the poetry that I've gotten to hear this year that has made almost every one of my days a little bit better. And as I learned to think about things from Jeremy Ziller, one of our board members, 5% better is much better. So in honor of the gift that poetry has been to me through the NSE series, I'm going to read something very short from Etel Adnan's book, Time, from the section No Sky. It's the fifth movement. It's very short, essentially 2 haikus. I chose it because I feel like, in a way, the metaphors speak to the work that we've done in this series. 5. Surprised by the persistence of the waves, the sea recedes to the skyline. The heart sets up its equations while history unfurls in bedrooms. Coming to you from my kitchen, my bedroom, closets. I thank you all so much, and I pass the mic to George.
Hello, everyone. I'm George Grella. I'm the Rails music editor, and I'm mainly just going to introduce Dan Tepfer, who's there sitting at the piano, who's going to give us a little performance. Dan is a very fine pianist and composer, and I guess predominantly known as a jazz player, but also has a record called Bach Goldberg Variations, which I cannot recommend strongly enough. It's fantastic playing of Bach and also his own improvisations on that. Dan is really a great guest to perform today because he has spent the past year really performing all over the internet. He working with software as well, developing a live performance system so he can play duets with other musicians at remote locations, and in addition, doing an interesting project called Bach Upside Down, where he plays Bach and has his own software invert everything he's played as a kind of accompaniment and postlude. And this is actually, today is the anniversary of the first day that he started it. So like the Rail social environment, he saw that things were very different and really started to throw himself into what was possible. And without further ado, here's Dan Tepfer.
Thanks so much, George, and congratulations, everybody at the Brooklyn Rail. I'm really honored to get to play for you today. I thought I would play some music from my project Natural Machines, which is a project where I've written computer algorithms that improvise with me in real time, and as you'll see, they also generate graphics, kind of graphical representation of the music as it's being improvised. So. Yeah, given that introduction, I might start with a little piece of Bach Upside Down, though. Bach Upside Down is a project where I play pieces by Bach, and then I've written an algorithm for my computer that plays back what I just played, but upside down. So it's just like if you took a picture and flipped it upside down. And with the music of Bach, it's kind of amazing how well it works. So let's check one of those out. And now something from Natural Machines. I'm going to play something that directly derives from what I just did. It's an algorithm that turns everything I play upside down, but while I'm playing. So it's a conversation with an upside down version of what I'm playing. It's called Inversion.
I think we all were
Please,
saying,
no.
wow, thank you. Thank you, Dan.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Congrats to you all.
And to you.
Thank you so much, Dan. We're now going to head over to Will and to Maisy.
Hello. I'm Will Chancellor. I'm a fiction editor here along with Maisy Card. We're both novelists.
Oh, I'm just going to jump in and say hello. I'm Maisy Card. And I'm going to do a reading from an excerpt by one of our contributors in the February issue, Betsy Narvaez, and it's called Symbology.
And I think I'm gonna go ahead and read from, oh no, sorry. Go ahead, Maisy, take it away.
All right. My mother sits back expectantly. She believes the intimations of death have spoken loud and clear. They warn of the fleeting nature of time, of mortality. She's telling me there's still time to come around, to see the world as she does before the hourglass runs out. I don't believe her. Death to me looks like a passage, like transition, a harbinger of change. I say to her great annoyance, death doesn't always mean death, mommy, not in dreams. I sat in the waiting room alongside my father and brother on the day her dream nearly came true, immersed in an unsettling stillness, cut only by the convulsive sobs of her crowd of sisters. They huddled together away from us, we who preferred our solitary internal smolder to the catharsis of their precipitated mourning. When it was done, after they'd cut her open and put her back together, my mother seemed angry, like she thought I'd lied to her. Her eyes opened to glaring slits, leaked accusations through her post-operative pallor, until the sedatives pulled her down into a perturbed, unnatural sleep. Back in her own bed, she was plagued with insomnia, finally drifting off each night when she'd reached the point of sheer exhaustion, only to be jolted awake by the feeling that she was laying in her own coffin. The third time it happened, she fled to the room I'd slept in as a child, wrapping herself up in one of my brother's old sweatshirts for protection. She remained afraid to go to sleep until the night she started to dream that my brother and I were still small. Each night, as her scars healed, as the heart that had betrayed the body resettled in her chest, my brother and I regressed. We were children, then toddlers, then babies, until she dreamt that we were still with her in her belly. Until even before that, to what she insisted was not a dream, but a memory of us all together in the primordial slime. Nameless and formless, we gravitated towards one another by an unfathomable force she explained away as love. My mouth hurts when she tells me this. The mythology she spins sends my tongue searching for the magic words that might convince her that dreams hold messages richer than warnings. I want us to agree for once. I want to tell her that she has not come full circle from the image of death to the spark of life for nothing. And my coffee grows cold as I prepare speeches that never come. Before I can begin, she says this: last night I dreamt I was reborn.
Wow, that excerpt from Betsy Narvaez is really excellent at highlighting the power of dreams. The excerpt that I'm going to read is from this book, Beyond the Sea, by Paul Lynch. We published this a couple months ago, and the paperback was actually out this week. He's an Irish writer, but I'm not reading this because of St. Patrick's Day. I'm reading it because, one of the great things about fiction is that we're able to highlight not just what is written, but how it's written. So much of what we take in is just information gathering, reading things for information. But I think most of the things that we publish here at the Rail have a lot of attention to what's happening underneath the line. A lot of the how it's written, not just the what. And this excerpt from Beyond the Sea is similar to the one that Maisy read with a woman asleep in her own coffin. This time it's two men who are asleep in their own coffin, floating in the middle of the sea. They're fishermen who have been blown off course, and they only have this rudimentary cooler, which is, the only place where they can sleep. They're on a little boat called a panga. But listen to these long vowels and how they capture the sounds of the sea. This is by Paul Lynch, Beyond the Sea. A feeling of sleep without sleeping, or maybe sleeping without sleep. Asleep, maybe, and yet the body listens. The body listening with an almost seeing. The senses alert to every motion of the boat. He knows a larger vessel would have been smashed by now. Instead, the panga rides each mountainous wave like an insect. Now and then he climbs out of the cooler with his body hunched, his arms bailing heavily in the dark. Seeing by the dying headlamp, a deepening sense the storm is blowing itself out. Without words, he understands that the true meaning of a storm is what it reveals, how chaos describes itself, gives form to what no eye can see. What he knows now, but does not tell Hector, that this northeasterly is blowing them far out. We must be 100 miles out into the Pacific. No one will look this far. A dream of silence. He wakes to a clear sense of things. Water lapping the boat, a still light. He inhales the cooler's in-baked smell of brine and fish. For 2 days and nights, he has watched his life from within some dark cell of the mind. Eternity within each waiting moment. Climbing out of that dark to bale water, snatching its sleep. Now he can hear Hector asleep with a rasp in his chest. Bolivar climbs out of the cooler and has to pull at his stung shut eyes. The sun soaring over emptiness. That's Beyond the Sea by Paul Lynch. I'm really excited about all the things that we have published here at the Rail in the year that I've been here, and we hope to have more writers on in the future during some of these lunchtime events.
Thank you so much, Will and Maisy. Next, we're going to hear from Ayana and Billy of the theater section.
Hi, thank you, Nick. Hello, everybody. So excited to be here and co-rep the theater section with Ayana. Forgive a bit of background noise that you might be hearing. I'm battling some construction just outside my window. We're going to share 2 quick presentations. The first from Dylan Pickus, followed by one from Kat Rodriguez and Michael Breslin, who co-created Circle Jerk. It's quite the title and quite the piece, and you will see why in just a moment. But first, for Dylan, we chose him and his essay In Search of Shared Goals, which is now out in the March issue of The Rail, because it is a deeply personal piece and as such a rather universal one. His essay speaks directly to the ways in which the American theater has responded to the current crisis, specifically through the lens of how institutions rely on, but perhaps fail to care for their artists. And the piece is applicable across mediums, which was why I think it's a great one to share today. As an arts administrator, Dylan looks at this moment to analyze the gap between artist and administrator, how the pandemic has widened it, and what we can all do to bridge it. I also want to quickly add that at the Rail, we will start to help playwrights out during this difficult time. We're going to start publishing short plays, lovingly called Rail Shorts. The first one will appear in our June issue, written by Sarah Einspanier, and those will be accompanied by original artwork. That's it from me, but before we get to the presentations, let me first pass it to Ayana.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Ayana Prescott, and I am one of the newest theater co-editors here at the Brooklyn Rail. Billy and I have so much planned for this theater section of the Rail in the upcoming months. We have commissioned pieces that the We See You White American Theater Movement 1 year later, the effects of an in-person theater pause on one's mental health, and the aging of a story. A play or musical may have worked back then, but do we necessarily need it now? We are very excited to continue to grow and build this section and bring thought-provoking pieces to the Rail's readers. So following Dylan's reading, we will be joined by Michael Breslin, one of the creators and stars of Circle Jerk, a digital play that has given quarantine theater new life. Perfectly blending the potentials of theater and film, Circle Jerk was a high-octane deep dive full of deep cuts about the ways in which white gay men spread misinformation, misogyny, and malice on the internet. But first, let's hear from Dylan.
Hi all, thank you to Billy and to Ayana for inviting me to write this piece, and it's such an honor to share it with everybody today. Back in November, something on social media caught my eye. A theater administrator whom I greatly admire posed a question on multiple platforms to the freelance theater artists following him. Do you feel like you have a sense of what's going on at theater institutions right now? The responses were swift and legion, with the general mood being hell no, and most positive answers relying heavily on the word vaguely. Either way, the message was clear. Freelance artists, the lifeblood and visionaries of our industry, felt completely shut out from the institutions that lead and shape the field in a moment where the existence of that field is under an existential threat. And now, a year after the entire theater industry was forced to shutter in-person operations, a span that felt inconceivable at the beginning of all this, it is time to examine both how these institutions have failed to protect the artists that provide their soul, and also what is lost in translation between artists and administrators working towards the same end. There are undoubtedly institutions that have responded admirably to this crisis. Soho Rep's project number 1, wherein 8 artists were granted salaried staff positions for the year, is a sterling example. Not to mention the list of small flash grants provided either directly to community members or via application or lottery. Even so, the lack of a coordinated and swift government response means these piecemeal initiatives are just a finger in the dike for a field in free fall, serving too few and too narrowly to have a significant impact. I expect the net effect will be devastating and far-reaching. Those who manage to still call themselves actors, directors, writers, designers, dramaturgs, choreographers, stage managers, and technicians after all this is settled will be overwhelmingly privileged and therefore blindingly white, having been unable to coast by on familiar wealth of previous savings. Not to mention that increased thresholds for health insurance from unions will drive away all who rely on healthcare to lead a safe and stable life. The storytellers we will lose to the plague, both the heartbreaking toll of actual deaths and the more metaphorical loss of freelance artists that had to move on, is gut-wrenching to imagine and sure to leave theater reeling for years to come. Now, as an arts administrator myself, I'm currently the Associate Director of Artistic Programs at Space on Writer Farm. I can admit to feeling my defensive hackles start to rise when I hear artists claim a lack of transparency. Sometimes I feel like all I do is communicate with artists, answering public questions about programs and applications, streamlining complicated internal discussions and decisions into transparent missives, and alerting our community about opportunities for and accomplishments by the artists in Space's orbit. These complaints are also regularly compounded by echoes of snide remarks about how administrators are just those who cannot hack it as artists, stuck in office jobs when the true movers and shakers are out creating work. While there are definitely those who navigate both worlds with grace and conviction, most of my colleagues at the institutions I've been privileged to work at that are there because they want to be there, not forced to settle for a job behind a desk. So often we sought out these jobs because we knew that they could be the positions where we could do the most good with the talents and skills we had been given. But it's this very pride in my work that demands that I set it aside to listen closely to what these artists are saying, what their needs and wants are in this moment, since my most pure mission in life is to support and champion them. After all, people come to the theater to see the plays and musicals, not read the year-end development letter. When assessing the various decisions I've made through my career, I've never been steered wrong by putting the artists first, to think of what would best serve them in that moment. I have learned to ask what they need, especially in moments where my white privilege can leave me blind to the needs of BIPOC artists. Now, I cannot swing a magic wand and make every artist's wish come true. Nonprofits are dense, lumbering, and inefficient entities constrained by extensive tax codes, budgetary restrictions, and board oversight that make any sort of nimble movement or response almost impossible. Furthermore, institutions are largely siloed from each other, too understaffed to contemplate industry-wide initiatives or programs. In order for theatrical institutions to do their part to stem this tide and emerge from the pandemic more responsive and equitable than before, we must place the artists we serve at the center of our work. We must bring them into the rooms where decisions are made and listen closely to what they have to say. But in order to achieve what we need to achieve, I also ask the artists not view administrators as obstacles to be overcome, but instead as those with best resources and intentions to set creatives up for success. Not every administrator is an artist, just as not every artist is suited for administration. Instead, let's recognize that each profession brings necessary and discrete skills to the table that will enable theaters to continue nourishing the soul of this country. Together, artists and administrators are the makers of theater, both necessary in their own ways to the creation of what goes on stage. Collectively, we need to work towards undoing existing power structures and building a more equitable model, one with a culture of mutual respect and admiration. No one is served by closing of ranks or scarcity mentality. The best advice I've ever received in my career was from a mentor who said to me, as a young literary intern, think of yourself not as standing guard at the gates, but rather opening them for people to come through. I've always held this close, letting it guide me to increase opportunity and transparency. But at this point in history, when the very foundation of these gates have been shaken, is it not time to imagine a world without the gates, where artists and administrators collaborate openly and freely? We should set our sights on a common goal and march towards it, hand in hand, the makers of theater together.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. And to close out, I'm going to now pass it to Kat and Michael.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Billy and Ayana. And Dylan, that was amazing. That was so inspiring. Thank you so much. I'm Michael Breslin. I'm one of the creative directors, writers, and performers of Circle Jerk, and a creative director of Fake Friends, the company that produced it. I'm here today with Kat Rodriguez, who's another creator of the piece and one of the stars, and also Patrick Foley, who's a creator of the piece and one of the, stars. And they'll be performing 2 monologues from Circle Jerk. Kat naturally is playing an AI generated meme diva, so pay attention for that. And Patrick is playing a Milo Yiannopoulos inspired queer eye demonic disinformation king. So just keep that in mind when you're listening. Thank you so much for having us again.
Betsy Ross was actually born a man. Facts. This is just one of the million facts they will not tell you in your history books. His story? More like Miss Story. Betsy was born as Billy. Billy Ross was so good at sewing and cleaning and colonial folk dances at such a young age that his parents made the choice for him to be raised as a woman. And thus he was raised as a she. Boy erased, girl replaced. But we, the gays, are not damaged. Damage and trauma are social constructions, literally constructed by a social society to make you think that you do not deserve to run the mother-tucking world. Imagine a world in which we were the majority, not just the majority, the vast majority. 90% of the people. That's what you get here. A place where you're not the minority. A place where people understand exactly who you are. Naturally.
Oh my God. Oh my God. You are so beautiful. I have created a conscious machine, an AI digital meme queen. Oh my God, you're so diabolical. Oh, it is such a shame you have this digipus. This is not the history of man. This is the history of fag, the history of white fag like you, Billy McEntee. Enough of this shame, baby. You have to realize you are no longer of any use to your own side. They've used you right up. They put this ring on your finger and domesticated you like they do to dogs. They make sure that you have the right politics, that you say the right things in public. They have castrated you, cut your dick off, all of you useful liberal gay idiots, and then put you into these ghettos in cities like West Hollywood, Chelsea, Castro. Oh, but Billy, you deserve to live in a penthouse, not some fucking co-op. Ah! Think of all the great gay people in history. Aristotle, Alan Turing, me. Why, as a member of the gay master race, would you ever want to slump down to this humorlessness of heterosexuality? This is your birthright. Claim it.
Thank you very much. That was a delight. That was Fake Friends, who thank you so much for taking time out of their retreat to keep working on fantastic works like the one we just saw. That's the theater section. Big hearts from me and Ayana. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Billy and Ayana and everyone involved, Dylan and Kat and Michael. I and Patrick, I'm now going to hand it over to Ben Clifford of the art scene section.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm one of 4 editors of the art scene section, along with my colleagues, Amanda Gluabisi, Sarah Ruffino, and Anna Tomei. But I suspect I can speak for all of us when I say how much of a privilege it's been to work with the Rail over this last year, and just to see the adaptability and resilience of the organization in finding new ways to do things in the face of very, very difficult conditions. And of course, this event, the 1-year anniversary of the new social environment, is as good a testament to that as I think you could find. But for us in art scene, really the number one thing that allowed us to continue doing what we do, keep everything rolling, was our amazing contributors, who I think are totally compelled to seek out artistic experiences, regardless of what the circumstances or conditions are, and just as compelled to share those experiences with the rest of us through their incredible writing. It's really that desire and that commitment that allows us to do what we do, and it's difficult to imagine what would have become of the section over this past very difficult year without our amazing body of contributors. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn things over in just a minute to 2 of those contributors. First up, we will have Ista Maya Murray, fresh off an appearance on the NSE just in December. In addition to an art critic, Ista is also a lawyer and a novelist. Personally, I am a big fan of the title of her most recent novel from last year, which is titled Art is Everything, which I think is as good a mission statement for our section as you could likely find. After Ista, we'll hear from Jason Rosenfeld, who's a regular at these events and also a longtime friend and ally of the Rail and of the art scene section in particular. He's professor of art history at Marymount Manhattan, and he's also an alum of NYU's Institute of Fine Arts, which I am as well. So it was perhaps appropriate that he was actually one of the first people that I ever met at a Rail event. And even at that very early moment, he made me feel immediately like part of a community that, over the past several years, I've come to value a great deal. So enough from me. I'm going to turn it over first to Ista. Please take it away. And when she's finished speaking, Jason, just jump right in. Thank you so much, everybody.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? Everything good? Thank you so much, Brooklyn Rail. Thank you so much, Ben. I'm going to be reading a short excerpt from Art is Everything, where I do art criticism in fiction. And the piece that I'll be reading from is titled, "Is This Healing Me or Is This Propaganda?" And it's framed as a rejected Yelp review of a 2016 retrospective of Agnes Martin's work at that actually took place at the Los Angeles Museum of Art at LACMA. So, what is so special about monotonous canvases painted blue, gray, and plaster white and light yellow and hatched all over with pencil lines? The question pops up at the LACMA retrospective as you stand before, say, Falling Blue, 1963. Falling Blue is a large brown canvas threaded with thin indigo lines of oil paint. It's just a bunch of lines, you mumble silently. This would not be very hard to do. Then you look at something like White Stone, 1964, which was painted a year later than Falling Blue and looks about as challenging. White Stone is just a huge canvas painted white and marked all over with little penciled squares. You might be inclined to walk out of the retrospective as you stare at White Stone. The work probably strikes you as pretty, yet boring and meaningless. Then you see 1967's Grass, where the boxes are even tinier and the canvas is painted intricately with 2 different shades of green. You turn away. You think about going home and doing the work that you have somehow scratched together in the gig economy, which is barely allowing you to remain afloat. You think that maybe you have wasted your time and your limited money by buying a ticket to Agnes Martin. But then, if you have just a little bit of patience, you might get lucky. It is possible that at this moment, a little shaft of light will begin to illuminate the dark cavern of your mind like an actual angel. That angel is the revelation that possessed Agnes Martin when she painted these seemingly monotonous works of muted colors and pencil lead. You might be in dire need of this angel because you have been struggling as an artist and a woman of color in Los Angeles for over 15 years. And now your crisis has reached full flower. Your dad is dead of something called multiple myeloma, and your beloved girlfriend Sochi, that goddess of the chiclet teeth, strong, rough hands, and a $500,000 a year job at an actuary's firm, took a long, hard look at your badly aging bohemianism and vanished like a leprechaun. What is this message of hope precisely? Turn to the paintings again. What do you see? You detect that Falling Blue, White Stone, and Grass are stunningly repetitive. You observe that Martin treated these themes without distinguishing between them, which, as it turns out, has the interesting effect of imparting to the sky, the stone, and the grass a marvelous hedonic equality. Equality, you think suddenly. The word has the force of epiphany. It shimmers through you. Your brain angel flaps its wings. And this is when, if you're maybe like in Libra rising or your moon is in Cancer, you'll have the very good fortune to realize Agnes Martin thinks they're all the same. Falling Blue, White Stone, Grass, all the same. It is at this point that Agnes Martin's work stops looking to you like so many shabby chic painting swatches and more like an idea or a philosophy. And it is. And if you have been witness to the nuclear destruction of your own personal dreams of love and professional fulfillment, then you will want to know if this philosophy contains any helpful advice. They're all the same what? At LACMA, you get very few hints. Agnes Martin was familiar with Taoist, Zen, and Buddhist thought, says a didactic text block stenciled on the wall, like an informational pamphlet or a curator's talk. Agnes Martin was familiar with Taoist, Zen, and, Agnes Martin, going on, was meditative. It continues. Well, you know something about this because you have studied the Tao, Zen, and Buddhism, yeah, at least a little. You have meditated sometimes. And so you are well familiar with the koans of radical equality, which purport everything is one, and happiness is the path, and what you think you will be. However, it bears noting that, though these bumper stickers dazzled you when you were a freshman at RISD and drunk on the honeyed mead of life, these cliches today strike you as dangerous placebos. Just around the same time that Sochi left you, you realize that they had sabotaged the mercenarily critical thinking that you should have practiced when filling out your college applications, because it would have led you to medical school and a mortgage and a family. Still, this isn't the time for nihilism. You are now breathlessly leaning way past the gray "do not cross" line marked on the floor, which creates a fascist capitalist barrier between you and the canvases. As you verge perilously close to Agnes Martin's paintings, you see that falling blue, white stone, and grass are made with compulsive attention to detail. It must have taken a terrifically long time for Martin to execute. The pencil markings are nearly perfect, yet handmade. The brushwork is as precise as mathematics, but also loose and free. And you start to feel a rumbling in your bowels, which is gastritis, occasioned by your reawakening suspicion that art is not the dark force that has hijacked your life, but rather is the only human invention that can afford spiritual rescue. You feel the rumbling syncopate with your swiftly beating heart, and then your combined nervous system and soul effervesce into joy that sparkles lightly throughout your body. And that's the end of the reading. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason. Thanks for putting this together today, everybody. And thank you, Ben and Amanda and Sarah and Anna, wonderful editors in the art scene section. I thought I would read, well, since I've been privileged to host 14 new social environments as of Monday, I thought I would just read some of my writing instead of just talking off the cuff per usual, and an opportunity to read 3 conclusions to reviews that I've written since COVID. And the first is of Turquoise Dyson's show at Pace in East Hampton, Studies for Bird and Lava, which was the first art that I saw since March of last year. The 2 sculptural works, I Am Everything That Will Save Me, Bird and Lava, and Scalar Test, #1, Bird and Lava, both 2020, are intricate creations at 3 and 1 foot in diameter, respectively. String is employed to bifurcate and cast shadows, and they expand suggestively into space. In them, Dyson continues her stated project of aiming for an abstraction that derives not from a European tradition, but that is redolent of the Black experience in the Plantation-Ocene, an era encompassing heritages of capital, colonialism, and racism. Most potent and moving is her connection of abstract forms to the lived histories of Black bodies and the built spaces of slavery, giving her work a considerable ballast. A triangle symbolizes the attic crawl space where Harriet Jacobs hid from slave masters in antebellum North Carolina. A square references the box in which Henry Brown concealed and posted himself from slavery in Richmond to freedom in Philadelphia in 1849. The potency of this project is undeniable. Like another abstract artist working outside a strictly formalist mode, Hilma af Klint, Dyson has pursued a language of abstraction that is personal and original in its totality. But unlike that Swedish abstractionist of a century ago, Dyson's works are richly and convincingly historical in their reference, without the Scandinavian artist's pursuit of an esoteric spiritualism. It is radical in practice, social, political, deeply researched and felt. The pictures are controlled and strong, leaving one eager to see what Dyson produces for the home of the Buckeyes in early next year. That's her residency at Ohio State. Luisa Rabia's show, a wonderful show, was at Peter Bloom Gallery at the end of last year, and this is from the December 2020, January 2021 issue of The Rail. The show's title, From Mitosis to Rainbow, implies a progression, or at least a range. The oil surfaces, typical in Rabia's inventive technique, are laid over an acrylic ground, and then she pulls them straight off the canvas, resulting in peaks of medium without fingerprint whirls, like miniature volcanoes on a topographical map, ringed by the finger marks. On top of this, she draws or shades with colored pencils to enhance the roundness of the forms and the delicate impasto. At the top of some are a few handprints, Comparisons to Pollock's number 1A 1948 at MoMA or the walls of Lascaux apply, but Rabia's picture is less about presence established than trying to convey the act of creation itself. I Am Rainbow of 2020 is the last painting you see as you move clockwise around the main room. Over 7 feet high and 10 feet wide, I Am Rainbow at a distance looks like a massive detail of a heavily mascaraed single eye from a human head in an Egyptian tomb painting, but up close details emerge. This central egg-like form with pinched ends lies on its long side, its elliptical shape echoed by colored rivulets of blue and orange and green that flow above and below it from right to left and respond to its contours. At the left edge, on a scrim of peach-colored matte background, these streams terminate in around 30 human feet that lie parallel to the upper and lower edges of the picture, their toes mere inches from the left edge, a communal extension of the 2 feet in Nameless, another picture in the show. The planetary theme in the other pictures continues here. The pulsing eye/egg eventually came to resemble Jupiter's great red spot as I spent more time with it. I Am Rainbow is a demonstrably hopeful image made by the artist in the midst of this trying year, a kind of coalition building in paint. The various celestial references and pictures populated by fingerprints and footprints throughout this worthy show connote a Whitman-esque celebration of the multitudinous. And finally, from the present issue of The Rail, review of Frick Madison, on which Amanda was critical in her help and assistance and in visiting the show with me. And I opened this review with, there is the Bellini, and then there is everything else. And here's the conclusion. In choosing Goya over Monet, Frick began the process of crafting every New Yorker's favorite local museum. His daughter, Henry Clay Frick, continued building the collection after Frick's death, and importantly, expanded its acquisition areas. But the Frick is unlike other house museums. Olana, Frederick Edwin Church's Neo-Persian handmade house and estate on that bluff in Hudson, New York, overlooking now the Rip Van Winkle Bridge, does not boast the collection that the Frick does. Few places do, but that allows curators there to delve into the history of the artist, his family, the workings of the house, its servants, its construction, the development of the parklands, the donkeys he procured in Syria, his travels. The teleportation of the Frick collection to Madison Avenue has allowed for an intense focus on the works without the complicating aura of its Gilded Age robber baron of a founder. On its return to its normal setting, the institution will need to productively deal with how such an array came to be and the difficult story of this union-busting West Pennsylvanian and his acquisition of taste via exploitation of human capital. That is something to be welcomed, as the upper floors of the mansion/museum will be newly accessible and a fuller sense of the house made visible. The pictures and statuettes and pots will slip back into their home, but the story will needfully be different. In the end, one realizes that both the works and the viewer will long to be back in the distinctive and dramatic interiors of Frick 70th. And in a sense, that is the point. Thanks so much, everyone. Congrats to the Rail.
Thank you, Jason, Ista, and Ben, and Amanda in the audience, and everyone in the art scene section. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over now to Jillian and Dance.
Hello. Wow. Each contribution has been incredible. It's like reading an issue of The Rail from front to back. I am Jillian. I am the dance editor of The Rail. And I'm so excited to present to you two of the dance section's contributors, who are both multi-talented, Doug Lacour and Orlando Hernandez, in part of this celebration. They both embody the cross-disciplinary spirit of The Rail in their writing and their dance practices. Doug is a Brooklyn-based choreographer, dancer, and writer. And it was about a year ago when we were working on a text together that he was writing from his perspective as a dancer within a work called Hebel. And we slowly were realizing as the pandemic became more and more real that it was not going to happen in person. So his words brought it to life in a way that we didn't even imagine. But one way we have been able to experience dance this year is through film and other digital presentations. And Doug has written a lot on dance in film. That's some of the pieces we first worked on together, especially dance horror films, which you'll see a bit in the work that he's presenting today. And I'll let him say a bit more about that before we share it with you. And Orlando is a Providence, Rhode Island-based tap dancer and poet. And he first began contributing this year during this bizarre time and really put into words a lot that we were grappling with: violence against Black lives, the isolation of the pandemic, in a piece called Continuation in the Break, Notes on Black Lives and Tap Dance, in which he wove together tap dance history, social and political critique, personal reflections, and even some poetry. And he will be sharing a multimedia historical dream, which he will say a bit about before we show that to you too. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Doug.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you to everyone at the Rail for making this amazing event happen. So yeah, I'm going to show a short excerpt from a new solo that I'm working on. I think the pandemic really put me in a place of kind of confronting my training and my past. I actually came to dance first as an Irish step dancer, so today is a very special day. St. Patrick's Day was sacred when I was young. So yes, kind of trying to think about that. And I also trained as a classical violinist, and this is one of the first times I'm starting to work with my own music. So I've composed some music for this as well. And yeah, we can take it away. Thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Doug. Wow, I don't know if I mentioned the title of the piece, Mirror for the Prince, and it's an ongoing solo project you're working on. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, it's very early, but in process, so we'll see where it goes.
And I definitely
Thanks.
picked up on the Suspiria vibes we were talking about, which is one of the horror films that Doug has written about. And
yeah, I was like, let's get some
edge.
Pink.
Okay, and over to Orlando. The work you will be showing is called Panfilo de Narvaez. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm just going to stop talking and hand it over to you, Orlando.
Thanks, Jillian. And thanks everyone for having me here. It's beautiful to be a part of this. Thanks to Jillian also for helping me edit the piece that I ended up publishing in the Rail. I feel really good about the Rail as the home for this piece. Kind of and it was an aspirational home, so it was super cool to have the piece end up there. This piece that I'm going to show right now is actually from some years ago, but if I'm not mistaken, it's from 2015. So it's actually some of my oldest dance work that's in this vein. But when I was thinking about what to show, this felt kind of oddly resonant with pandemic dance production. I think you'll see why. It's kind of me in a studio, kind of making connections, putting things together with some different media. I think embody some of the like the disjuncture and play that have sometimes been able to find when not in a general cloud or void or whatever else. But yeah, the only thing to kind of know about it is that it departs from this the account of the Narvaez expedition by Cabeza de Vaca. It was first published, I believe, in 1542, and is about a kind of failed conquistador mission in the 1520s to 30s, when there was a big shipwreck off of what's now Florida, and then a few shipwrecked Spaniards. A remarkable, super interesting book. Maybe I'll put it in the chat. But so check that out. And it kind of departs from there. So I think that's it. Thanks everyone.
It wasn't special like I thought it was special. and the joy we share. Gomara, page 309, says that St. James, the patron saint of Spain, and St. Peter, Cortez's own patron, appeared on the battlefield. Bernal Diaz, chapter 34, says that he, poor sinner, failed to see them. Cervantes de Salazar tells a fanciful story of an unknown horseman who swept the Indians before him. He and Gomara are drawing on an old tradition. St. James, Santiago, is first described as a warrior in the Historia Silense, page 76. He made his most famous appearance mounted on a white charger at the mythical Battle of Clavijo. He is often depicted as the Moor slayer, Matamoros, on the tympana of Spanish churches, and his name gave rise to the famous battle cry, Santiago y Sierra España, generally shortened to Señor Santiago, or simply Santiago. To ward off the cold, we had provided 4 or 5 big fires on the road, and at each one we warned the Spaniards, lest on the way some one of them might faint or die.
Thank you. Wow.
Thank you, Jillian, and thank you, Doug and Orlando. That was beautiful. Next, I am going to turn it over to a message from Jessica Holmes, our tonic author, our tonic editor. Just a moment while I pull this up. Okay. Without further ado, Jessica Holmes.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica Holmes, and I'm the editor of the Brooklyn Rail's Art Tonic column, and I'm thrilled to be part of this one-year celebration of the Rail's new social environment series. Art Tonic publishes once a season, in online format exclusively, a long-form piece of journalism focusing on one artist-endowed foundation or an organization that otherwise supports artists. Since its founding in 2019, Art Tonic has taken a deep dive into the inner workings of foundations as varied as the Gordon Parks Foundation, the Holt Smithson Foundation, and the Gottlieb Foundation, to organizations such as Pen and Brush, Printed Matter, and Studio in a School. In the summer of 2020, writer Nancy Princenthal undertook a profile of Artist Space, the artist-driven exhibition and performance space founded downtown in 1972. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Nancy as she reads from her piece on the legendary institution. Thank you, Nancy.
And without further ado, I will now turn the mic over to Nancy.
Thank you, Jess, virtually, and thanks to everyone at the Rail. I'm so happy to be part of this event. It's been fantastic so far. This assignment came to me, this opportunity came to me, in sort of the depths of our uncertainty late spring last year. And it was a time when there was no art to be seen at all, really. Everything was shut down. And it was actually a kind of wonderful chance to look back and drill down. I drilled down pretty deep. So I'm grateful for that chance. Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from the beginning and then a little bit from the middle and the end. Here goes. Shocking but true. Artist Space, essential model for a generation of feisty, funky, youth-driven nonprofits, is nearly half a century old. More surprising still, it was entirely dependent at the outset on government support at a time when both the governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, and the United States President, Richard Nixon, newly reelected, were Republicans. Promising to make up for a dearth of opportunity for young artists, the people who would establish Artist Space rounded up a bunch of painters and sculptors and offered them the chance to call the shots, all on the state's dime. The organization's name declared its mission. Exhibitions, initially 3 solos at a time, were to be selected by artists with well-known figures, choosing those less widely recognized. The first choosers, mostly named by Irving Sandler, a founding co-director, included Vito Acconci, Romery Bearden, Chuck Close, Donald Judd, Sol LeWitt, Dorothy L. Rockburn, and Richard Serra. For following seasons, a letter was sent to more than 600 artists, asking each to propose 10 selectors. 420 responses came back. So following this introduction, which I've sort of abbreviated, I summarized some of Artist Space's more memorable exhibitions and events, including the 1977 picture show, for which Douglas Crimp famously wrote the catalog essay, and a 1989 show about AIDS, presented under director Susan Wyatt in the shadow of brewing culture wars, led in large part by Senator Jesse Helms. Okay. At Artist Space, I'm going back to the article, Nan Golden was organizing with federal support witnesses against our vanishing, a tribute to artists living with or felled by AIDS. David von Eurovich wrote the catalog's lead essay. Fearing the text would be found libelous, von Eurovich called New York's Cardinal O'Connor a Nazi and fantasized about setting Helms on fire, among other things. Wyatt, on the advice of the board and its lawyer, preemptively ran it by the NEA and offered to replace the portion of the funding covering the catalog with income from other sources. Instead, the entire grant was withdrawn. The board, outraged, unanimously refused to relinquish it. The standoff became front page news at the New York Times and was also covered in the Boston Globe and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Leonard Bernstein declined National Medal of Arts in defense of Artist Space. That too was a front page Times story. Alec Baldwin got the Creative Coalition to speak out, and Larry McMurtry, then president of Penn, wrote an op-ed piece for the Washington Post. Even Cardinal O'Connor said he didn't think the grant should be withdrawn. And in fact, rather stunningly, it was eventually reinstated. To my mind, this breadth of response in addressing the withdrawal of public funding from a small nonprofit arts organization is harder to imagine now than the humble conditions of its birth 17 years earlier. Von Eurovich's essay, though, has lost none of its heartbreaking immediacy. His rage at the medical establishment and the government for withholding access to medical information and treatment, and specifically for denying experimental drugs to anyone without a private physician, that is, anyone poor, among whom people of color figure disproportionately, are in the spring of 2020 all too resonant. While scarcely a dozen years earlier, Douglas Crimp had argued that even the most brutal images had been stripped of meaning by the new image regime, Wojnarowicz and his peers were staking everything on the explosive force of pictures and words. In all caps, he wrote famously, "When I was told that I'd contracted this virus, it didn't take me long to realize I'd contracted a diseased society as well." Watching the evolution of increasingly elaborate rituals of private mourning, he advocated public rage instead. "I imagine what it would be like," he wrote, "if friends of those who died from AIDS would take their corpses to DC and then, quote, blast through the gates of the White House and come to a screeching halt before the entrance and then dump their lifeless bodies on the front steps." The image lingers. And as with pictures, Witness's legacy lingered too. In fact, in many ways, it marked a breaking point. NEA reauthorization hearings were underway at the time of the Witnesses show, and Wyatt advocated for it actively. She believed that by working hard and successfully to gain access to powerful figures at the endowment and in the federal government, by wearing pearls rather than black leather, as she put it, and acknowledging that her parents were lifelong Republicans, she could change minds. But it was the last major artist space controversy in which government support was pivotal. NEA support had been a small but important part of the organization's budget. As with grants to individual artists, it carried with it the crucial endorsement of the agency's peer panel reviews, an irreplaceable system that would soon expire. A period of flux for artist space followed, as was true for other art spaces founded in the 1970s. Longtime board member Carolyn Alexander told Claudia Gould, named director in 1994, that before her appointment, quote, the board seriously considered whether artist space should vote itself out of existence. By 1989, the year Witnesses opened, the budget had reached nearly $1 million. In the lean years that followed, it was slashed by nearly half. Several leadership teams later, Stefan Kalmar was made director in 2009 and held the post for 7 years, emphasizing brainy market skewering art, which often enough became highly collectible, by such then emerging figures as Jan Vo, the Bernadette Corporation, Hito Steyrl, and Cameron Rowland. Unapologetic about focusing on creators rather than audience, Kalmar asserted in a 2014 interview that one thing he and his colleagues at other nonprofits agreed on was, quote, not pandering to populism. To me, he confirmed, quote, we're not for everybody. We're really not. Of course, anti-populist or not, Kalmar was faced with financial challenges. In his case, the post-2008 financial crisis. When I asked about the lack of government support and the inevitable reliance on private money, including that of gallerists, he observed that tax exemption is government funding, about which he is ambivalent. Unquestionably, though, the paucity of outright public grants has increasingly aggravated relations among commercial and nonprofit art institutions. Jay Sanders, the current director, is also fully committed to experimentation. Commissioning work is the hallmark of artist space, he believes. Just as important to him is the organization's structural openness. The artists are in control of what he calls the touch points, he explains, adding, even now in the new premises in a sleekly renovated cast iron building in Tribeca, we don't have a fixed office space, noting his emphasis on artist prerogatives, which arguably align with Kalmar's anti-populism. I asked if he worried about being called an elitist. We think about that a lot, he said. We do try to make the work accessible, but we don't try to programatize that. We let the artists go all the way with it. I hope that's not elitist, that there's some generosity there. If there's a destabilizing element in the work, I hope it's fruitful and not elitist. It seems no exaggeration to say that all of this is now at risk. COVID, Sanders says, has made it clear how fragile the cultural sector is. Supporting artists and being open to their evolving interests, these are indeed good and enduring values, present at Artist Space from the start, and some things have improved since its founding. It is no longer tenable for a handful of friends and colleagues, almost exclusively white New Yorkers, to suggest they have the necessary access and knowledge base to fulfill such an organization's mission. While government funding is, I think, well worth fighting for, over-reliance on it was clearly a problem. On the other hand, being answerable only to supporters in the private sector brings problems that are perhaps less tractable because less transparent. Was giving up on government support for culture a symptom of growing division in this country or a cause? It's hard to be nostalgic for a time when progressive new art, that is post-war abstract expressionism, was used as a political tool for consolidating American cultural hegemony. But then it's hard not to yearn for public reckonings based in the assumption that contemporary art belongs to everyone and needs to be on the civic agenda and budget. Given the straits we're now in, these may be questions for another day, or as I see it, more urgent than ever. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was a really beautiful piece that was published and that you read just now, and it's so crucial to remind ourselves of, you know, the history and lineage of what has led us to this moment, and all of the other organizations that we're in this with. So thank you so much. We have a tradition in our lunches and in the NSE series of ending with poetry. So absolutely not least but last is our poetry section. And I'm now handing the mic over to Anselm Berrigan.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? My name's Anselm. I'm the poetry editor. I get the poems that go into the issues. And every now and then I send a mass email out to find poets to read at the end of the NSE. I'm probably overdue to do for one, actually. And I'm going to read a couple pieces from the current issue, the March issue, and then turn the mic over to Kyle Decuyan, who's joined us to read as well. The March issue, in the March issue, the poetry section is a tribute to the poet, teacher, editor, publisher, and prose writer Louis Warsh, who passed away last November, and had been working and writing and living mostly in New York for decades. And it was you know, very under the radar in certain ways, but there's a lot of his work out there and a lot of people who had things to say. So we wanted to open the space up and give the issue over to Louis. And so it's a much larger section than usual. There's 26 or 27 people who contributed work, prose pieces, poems, really beautiful piece by his daughter, actually. And Ron Padgett, Ann Waldman, Uche Nduka, and a number of others have poems in there in remembrances. And you know, the Times didn't give Louis Warsh an obituary, which is ridiculous. It's that kind of thing. So I felt like the rail space needed to be there, and I appreciate everybody's help with that. And so what I want to do is read, there's 3 poems of Louis's from a manuscript called Elixir that is going to be published by Ugly Duckling Press probably next year. It's the last manuscript he was able to finish before he became too ill. And there's a long poem called On the Western Front, dedicated to Kat Lassard. And it's in 15 sections, 15 short sections. I'm going to read from the back of it, maybe 5 or 6 sections, and then see what time it is. So this is starting with section 10. Time is like a river. No, shit, it's like a song. You can give away more than you take and sleep through the night with a heavy heart. It's possible you have lead poisoning or maybe something you ate at a chain restaurant on a blind date when you were a kid, brought on an attack of nerves, and you never recovered. A nurse came to take my blood pressure and gave me a pill to knock me out. Gladys Knight and the Pips were singing Midnight Train to Georgia. The conductor says all aboard, but I'm asleep on my feet. Hang on tight or let go. It'll be over in a minute. 11. I had cherry pie for dessert, but the crust was too moist. A cop wrote me a ticket for eating a fruit tart on the street. The ghosts of love summoned me to a lonely grave. Season's greetings from the pest control guy and his mother. 12. My boat washed up on an island where there were a few palm trees and a couple of squirrels. You can see the squirrels running up one side of the tree and down the other. The defining moment of my life came and went and no one noticed. Will the author please stand up? The house lights go on and the audience tosses flowers onto the stage, but the author has retired to the local pub for a game of darts and a pint of Guinness. 13. Cold brisket waits for no one. It comes with a baguette. She leapt to her feet as if someone had summoned her from the dead. The feeling is reciprocal. I pull up my fly in mixed company. Full moon at noon. 3 songs for a quarter. Put it in writing just in case I forget. A couple of sprites on tap. My name is Renee. I'll take your order. 14. No fault of your own. You took a step backwards into the past and saw it differently each time around. The cows on the hillside swatting flies from their behinds, the smell of mosquito spray on someone else's skin in the back of the car, a slave to a system someone else created, the flood warnings, the icy windshield, the surfers on the horizon going home or staying out too late so you can never go back to where you came from, all the false promises like flowers with broken stems in the dust on the side of the road, the theory of cycles, the eternal recurrence, paradise lost and found and then lost again, all in one breath. 15. Today was less like the day before yesterday than the night before, which started late and went on without us over the roofs of the houses, and the roadside stand selling fresh eggs and lemonade also disappeared from the field of vision as we drove up a mountain and then down the other side. This is where I came in and where you got off, but in a manner of speaking, we were both in sync, like the dog-eared map on the floor of the ocean, like the crisp fries in a paper cup I ate on my way home from some public swimming hole on the subway as a kid. And 16. I should have known better than to think she would meet me at the Café Bonaparte in Paris where Roland Barthes used to hang out. I sat in a corner facing the door. Only a fool would sit around for hours waiting for someone to come, someone they didn't know personally, but whom they had seen from a distance, the flesh and blood, the halo, the long vintage skirt purchased for half price and the hate. You have to know when you're being stupid. And I know I've made the same mistake before, thinking something was going to happen when there wasn't a snowball's chance in hell. You can flaunt your theories until you're blue in the face and everyone within earshot is falling asleep. Class dismissed. Those are my favorite words. I sit in the back of the room waiting for the class to end. Then I run into the streets like an escaped convict, like a doe in a poem by Wordsworth, bounding over the hillside. I lie in the grass and see the sunlight through the tops of the trees. And at night, I see the moon staring back at me like an old friend. Everybody all right? And I'm just going to read very briefly from a piece of my own, which is called From an Ongoing Untitled Poem for Louis Wash, which I decided was a temporary title, but I decided that would be the actual title of the poem, so that way I could call it something and never have to finish it. I started writing to be myself. Now I start by imagining someone else. Don't worry about pretending. I'm not trying to be you without finding myself all over in advance on Again's plateau. The writing is in the arrangement, but it, a pronoun, was never meant to begin. Sleep on the couch in the monster's tower, walking single file away from destruction. Monsters in dreams may know when to leave. Sleep on the couch and wake up pantsless in Berkeley at a party to celebrate your leaving for work. Go straight awake to Zoom to lie and miss the conversation that made the reading worth attending. Minor flashes of disgathering light. The year may attempt to deny its own end, but it also only began because a number said to. All us non-numbers want the year to end. It feels like the last non-digression. Ask they year to choose between shoe or tree in a circle of years and leave the speaker a mouth for a map. Don't sweat the fruit fly that's been landing near you all day. It's been through its own non-year, hovering near the edge of the page prior. And now I want to introduce Kyle DeCuyan. Kyle's a poet, performer, and translator who writes poems and makes performances. He's the executive director of the Poetry Project at St. Mark's Church. And there are poems of Kyle's in the July-August 2020 issue, I believe. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good, Anselm. It was really good to hear you read those poems. Thank you. And thank you to Lewis. And thank you to the Brooklyn Rail. I'm going to read one poem, and it is Prayer for the Not What Praying I Become. For the brisk, quick chill of an old humiliation, for remorse, for the grotesque, prayer for fear, for what is unlovable and uncertain, what hurts me and refuses to relent, prayer for who and what is intractable, for severance, for loss, prayer for the incalculable, the unsolvable, the bottomless, prayer for what denies and hinders balance, prayer for the persistence of failure, prayer to nothing, to no one, myself, not even for what is speechless, for the exhaustion that speech leaves impossible, for accident, for consequence, for example, and what I did not mean, prayer which fixes nothing, nothing, just a word prayer of saying prayer for the correspondence I couldn't continue, for who was a friend almost, and then I wasn't there, prayer for abandonment, for disappointment, for tardiness, overcommitment, lapse of judgment, indecision, wrong decision, prayer for the inscrutable anarchy of love, prayer that you don't understand me, prayer where I am alone, uselessness of prayer, stupidity, my clinging to the notion, disattachment of mind, of idea, of self. I'm giving up prayer and talking anyway. I'm up, giving, I am giving, am up, am I up, am prayer. I say too much, my chronic and excessive sincerity, prayer, dork prayer for earth and all its concomitants. I did it impulsively, prayer, clumsy prayer, foolishness, prayer. I already did this. Nothing is original and I have nothing new to say, prayer. I have no idea. I'm past the point, prayer. So much stopped being possible, prayer, and still I did prayer. And what? Nothing, prayer. Nothing, prayer. I forgot it. Once I could prayer, and when did I discover prayer that I would not? No longer prayer, prayer for not enough. When change, prayer, when will, prayer for never. I have this nostalgia for something I'm not sure prayer I ever had. And you think, will it ever be like this again, prayer? But what was it in the first place? Suddenly actually happens very gradually. Prayer, it's just perceiving of perceiving that is sudden. My heart, my mind, my breath, prayer, my gut, my groin, my spirit are in the fog at a party, and they're all wondering if anyone's even there anymore. Prayer for dancing, I am missing. I am in the Carl Craig piece at Dia. The prayer is in the wondering if life resumes or changes. It's only ever changes. And in our craving for the past, what we think of as prayer, as clinging, is actually acquisition. All this missing gets everywhere. Is prayer is intimacy, or desire is intimately tied up with an idea of place where we maybe felt we were just about to belong. Do you ever feel like you need to articulate some particular pain or wish or intention within yourself, and the only thing you can summon is the memory of music, and you're like, how do I turn off I love the nightlife? I'm trying to hear myself, and it's all this, please don't talk about love tonight. Everything I wanted and thought I couldn't, prayer, but it was didn't, haven't, wouldn't, shouldn't, isn't, couldn't, nothing, anything prayer equates or makes, does what I say I wish at all. Prayer, why can't I stop? Prayer, just stop. I swear to God, prayer, for what I started and deleted. Prayer, I never told you, is what and where. A rarity is there. Birds all coming up in my voice, ravenous with flight. They have no care of me, or no care I can think of but where they're going. Thanks, everybody. Thank you again to the Brooklyn Rail.
Thank you, Kyle, Ansem, for blowing our minds yet again. For those of you I've yet to meet, I'm Sophia Pedlow, the managing director here at the Rail. And 1 year ago today, we started this series as a response to the widespread closures and uncertainty brought on by COVID-19. And while we all continue to maintain more or less physical distance, this virtual space has been a way for us to remain close and nurture our creative community that is so necessary to our collective survival. We'd like to thank everyone who's made this possible. That means you, the guests, who bring all your energy and warmth and questions into the room. I see so many familiar faces today and every day, but I see you, GE, Yannick, Serena, Umberto, to name just a very few. You've been with us since the start. I'd like to thank our artists, writers, performers who share their talents so generously, as today has showcased. The fantastic Rail team who keep this engine going. And I'm grateful for the thought partnership we have in Lauren Bond and Metabolic Studio for their friendship and guidance on this journey. And the thousands of individual donors who helped us reach our fundraising goal. And the artist foundations that make the thing that is the Rail possible. That's the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation, the Guston Foundation, the Richard Pousset Dart Foundation, Studio in a School, Daedalus Foundation, and many more. Most of all, today, we'd like to thank the Willem de Kooning Foundation, who not only continue to support the beating heart that is our journal through sponsoring our art scene section, they've also stepped up to support this ongoing initiative of the new social environment for the year to come. We couldn't do it without you. I'm handing roses to you all. And finally, the mic to Phong Bui, our publisher and artistic director. Close us out, sir.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you, Ansem, Nancy, and all of the wonderful contributors. This has been the most wonderful celebration of culture, which reminds us that the very word culture had its roots in the Latin word colere or cole, which means to tend to the earth and grow, or cultivation and nurture. The very act to mobilize, to activate, to nurture culture have proven to all of us the Rail as an effective arsenal again, those who wish to undermine or even to destroy it. And it's happened throughout history. So the sole reason why we started our new social environment lunchtime conversation this very day, last year, March 17, it was so fast, was simply because our emphatic commitment to do everything we do as the utter opposite of what Trump administration was doing in the last 4 years, leading especially to his 2020 re-election. We take the powerful slowness of culture against his deployment of speed. We bring our communities of friends, artists, writers, poets together to restore the dignity and the beauty of our language, be it visual, movement, it's written or spoken words. Again, his bombastic downgrading of simplistic uses of words like that of Karl Kraus. Some of you remember, who once made a remark of Hitler during his rise to power in 33 and 34. He said the secret of the demagogue is to make himself as stupid as his audience so they believe they are clever as he. We also managed to invite local activists, different part of the country, from Detroit, from New Orleans to LA and elsewhere, to share with our audience their struggle against political and social issues concerning immigration, voting suppression, poverty, prison reform, and so on, and how the arts and the humanities can play a role in healing while providing necessary refuges, outlets to their daily lives. In that very same day, March 17, 2019 in recognizing immediately how Trump struck another psychological blow to our psyche by the term social distancing as a way, his way to intensify fear. You guys remember mistrust against one another, therefore leading to his liking of chaos. We, the Rail, knew that the only way to do it is to bring together our various friends, you know, our friends, our colleagues, to our Zoom platform as a cultural order from the 12 section that already exists in our journal. We didn't have to invent. It's already there in monthly basis, from field notes, art, critic page, art scene, art books, music, dance, film, theater, poetry, and fiction. We all knew that we must undertake our activism on daily basis. In other words, in knowing how people like Trump and any other autocrats from past history until now, including Mussolini, Hitler, Kim Jong-un in Korea, Assad in Syria, Erdogan in Turkey, Maduro in Venezuela. These are people who tend to have immense attitude for power, aptitude for so much of it is giving them enormous amount of energy, so much that they can't even go to sleep, keep them up at night. So by organizing our program every day, we can match their stamina. So I'm pleased to say that the Rail, we found a way to unify our communities of the arts, of humanities, and the sciences, as they appear in our monthly journal already. We are thrilled to share with you that our calendar is filled until early fall. As Toni Morrison once said, if you surrender to the wind, you can ride it. We recognize our creative friends are those who know how to walk up and down the stair without the need to rest their hands on the handrail. As Anna Arendt famous dictum, thinking without the banister. That's our power. That's our power in cultivating the confidence in each of us as autonomous, non-conformist voices, like an instrument. Each of us had its own unique sound, but we all can take part in the symphony. The Rail is a symphony indeed. So thank you all. Happy 1 year anniversary to every one of us. And long live the Rail. Hello.
I toast to everyone. You all should be able to turn on your mics now. And thank you, Fong, and everyone on the Rail staff.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you. Cheers.
Live the Rail. Thank you.
See you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Bravo.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ansel. Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi, for joining. Thank you,
It's been
Nancy.
such a special event.
Follow Kyle and Anthem.
We're so grateful.
Thanks everyone so much.
Thanks,
you.
Serena. Hi, Serena.
Wonderful performances. Thank you so much.
Really great.
Thank you, Orlando.
Thanks,
Happy
George.
birthday, y'all.
Hey, Andre.
Thank
Thanks, Jillian. Thanks, Maisie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Ciao, Yi. Thank you. Thank you, you guys. Keep up the good works. Hi, Serena. Sending love and courage, and see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye.
You guys.
Hi, Andre.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Be well and God bless.
Bye.
Much
Thank
love.
you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
You too.
Another 20 years. Ciao.
We're just